What's up, folks? Matt here with Lake Erie Arms. I'm standing here with Andy Gundalf Lake once again. He is our gunsmith here at our custom shop at Lake Erie Arms, and I just did a video the other day, a little quick 60-second review of the Springfield Prodigy, and one of the things I had mentioned was maybe bringing that gun in here and having a trigger job done by you. Now, we had a couple people ask, okay, so what exactly does he do to 1911s? What is he gonna do to my trigger? You know, you say get a trigger job, what does that actually mean? And so I said, all right, let's get some of these guns out, take a look at some of the guns you've just recently worked on and see what exactly you're doing to these guns that is making them awesome. So let's start out with this one right here. We've got a Ruger 1911. Tell me what you've done here.
Sure, so the Ruger 1911 I brought in this is sort of dual purpose. This is kind of a comparison against this one that I just tuned up, but also this is one that I laser engraved just as kind of a quick plug for, we do laser engraving in house, and yes, we can get really silly with it if you want. You can see this one's got a lot of decorative laser engraving on it, pretty much covered the entire gun. This is one of my guns. I just use it as a guinea pig for laying out laser, practicing, getting good at it, and I think it turned out pretty good. Otherwise, this Ruger is mostly untouched. Action is not super smooth. The trigger is short, but still kind of heavy. This one, if you bear with me a moment, about 4.5 pounds. When we talk about trigger jobs, action tuning, tuning up guns, what's basically happening is I go into the gun and I hand fit a lot of the metal engagement surfaces. Obviously, guns have a lot of working parts inside of them. A lot of things have to interface with each other to do the gun things. When these guns are manufactured by Ruger, even Kimber's custom shop, a lot of that hand fitting doesn't happen like what you get with things like Wilson Combat, Nighthawk Customs, Caspian, things like that are really, really high-end guns. Every single little piece and part inside that gun, they go through and they hand fit it, they hone all the surfaces so that all the little microscopic machining marks are gone, and those pieces can all just glide across each other, super nice and smooth. Not at all comparing myself to the likes of Nighthawk Customs, but I'm functionally following the same process that they do on existing guns that are already made, just taking what's there and improving on it to where it's noticeable, when you're out on the firing line actually shooting.
As you said, something like this, it's mostly aesthetics, right? Showing off some of this laser engraving, that is awesome.
Correct.
Now this one right here, now this is a customer gun, correct?
Correct.
And you showed me this one before, and the first thing I noticed obviously was that trigger. So go ahead, tell me what you did with this gun and why someone might want that done to theirs.
So this was a customer gun again that they brought in, just wanted it gone through and tuned up. They kind of wanted that Gundalf touch on it. First thing is the action, real nice and smooth, nice and tight fit. Some of that is just Kimber over Ruger. Their slide to frame fit is a little bit better. This one still had some clunkiness to it, and I don't know how well you guys can hear on the audio, but this thing just glides nice and smooth now. I've gone through and, again, honed all the engagement surfaces of all the internal components that interface with each other, and then I go through and tune the trigger. And when I say that, the sear to hammer engagement surface is just a bare machine finish. They machine them to a specification from the factory, and then those parts are machine surfaces that are having to move against each other, and they don't move very smoothly. I'm not removing material. I'm not taking dimensions off of any of the internal components where this thing's going to become unsafe or you're going to get hammer follow or things aren't going to function right. It just moves easier when you have machine surfaces that have all those little microscopic ridges. That creates friction. Friction creates weight on the trigger. When you stack up 5 or 6 different moving parts that are rubbing against each other functionally, the more friction there is, the heavier the trigger is. I just try to take that friction away again. Really fine Arkansas stones. I'm honing everything down, polishing things out, really honing it in where it just takes less effort to get the trigger to break. So for this one, for instance, post Gundalf treatment, This one is that was right at 3. Just under 3 again. So it's not a monumental difference. You know, this one was up around 4. This one's only about a pound less. I can tune them a little lower than that. Generally speaking, I like to leave a little bit of weight on the trigger so that when the customer comes back and gets it, they're not like massively surprised and sending rounds when they don't really want to. The other thing we did on this one was milled the slide and ported the barrel. So that's got 4 nice ports on either side. Those are at a 35-degree angle from 12 o'clock axis of the bore. Doesn't really matter to anybody, but that's just a really good where you keep pretty good vertical dispersion of the gas, which keeps the muzzle down nice and flat, not throwing so much sideways. Really performs well. Takes a full-size 1911 shooting full power 45 loads and just parks it right back down where you started from when you aim, and manages your muzzle rise amazingly well. They shoot like 9mm or even 22s, honestly, when that's done. Smoothed out the action to frame, or the slide to frame fit, just tuned up the action a little bit. One of the things on 1911s that is kind of an issue is right down in here, if we can catch that on the video, there's a disconnector that sits proud of the frame. That is a safety feature for 1911s. That disconnector will only sit up out of the frame when the slide is fully in battery. So if this slide were out of battery just the slightest little bit, it pushes that disconnector down and interrupts the trigger so the gun can't fire out of battery. It's a safety thing. That's one of those engagement surfaces that from the factory is the head of that disconnector is, they all have a seam down the middle of them because a lot of them are MIM, metal injection molded pieces. They're just not real nice and smooth. So you've got this little half circle up in the slide that thing sits up into, and anytime the slide moves, that half circle pushes it down out of the way. When you have one rough piece of metal and another rough piece of metal moving against each other, it just, again, creates friction, makes the slide not run smooth. That's one of the things that I really focus on, getting really nice and slick. So when you're trying to run that action, or when you're even shooting and that slide's recoiling, it's happening pretty effortlessly. It just makes the gun more fun to shoot. Trigger's nicer. It shoots flatter with the porting. I did re-Cerakote this slide. This is Cerakote tungsten. It's a really nice color.
And generally speaking, whenever you have to do any kind of slide work, milling out for a red dot or anything like that, you're going to have to re-Cerakote it so you don't have that bare metal surface, correct?
Usually that is the case. This was a stainless steel model Kimber, so this slide was stainless. Where these windows got cut out could have been left alone. Stainless can still rust. There still is a high enough carbon content in the grade of stainless used on pistols that it will rust, but it takes a really long time. You would pretty much have to neglect it egregiously. But I talked to this customer, gave him the option of either sandblasting and bead blasting this slide again, which would have yielded a finish very similar to this Ruger where it's not laser engraved. That's just a glass bead blasted finish. Or I told him I could Cerakote it while we're here and we're customizing a gun. Yeah. Cerakote gives it a little bit of a different look. So he elected to go with that on this one. It can go either way. If it's a non-stainless gun, anytime we do mill work where we're cutting through the finish into the bare metal, I usually recommend Cerakote. That way it's all sealed up and you're not going to be fighting an uphill battle with rust down the road in the future with the gun.
One of the big things, and we've had these kind of conversations before, and when I came in here, I kind of, I won't say scoffed at, but I didn't really see a great value in, these really precise, fine triggers. I was a Glock guy. My thought was, okay, you train enough, it's not really gonna make a difference, but getting into these leagues, it has been a huge difference. Being able to shoot some of your guns, some of the other guys' guns, some guns have had trigger jobs done, and it really takes you from that, oh, that's pretty good grouping, to holy crap, it's right in there. And it really has made a big difference for me in playing with some of these guns. And I know that a lot of you guys out there, you're really looking to get that competitive edge, or you're just looking to become a better shooter in general. And so this is really a great option. Well, Andy, as you know, with new shooters, a lot of the time, one of the issues we end up having is going to be issues with trigger control, anticipating that recoil, and having a long trigger pull, having a nasty little trigger, really just exasperates all those issues. So is this something that you would recommend to a new shooter to have a trigger job done on their gun? Maybe not necessarily on a 1911, but on any kind of gun they have. Do you recommend trigger jobs, generally speaking?
Generally speaking, yes. Mainly because it's one less thing that you have to remember. New shooters, they're taking in so much information. You're trying to teach them everything they need to know to be a good shooter. And if we can take one or two of those things and kind of make it something they don't have to laser focus in on and just make it easier on them, so it's one less thing they have to remember, it just pays dividends downrange. It gives them the opportunity to focus on things like grip, stance, recoil mitigation, aiming, which is super important. You know, you can do everything right, and if you're not aimed at the target, it doesn't really matter. So having a nice trigger, and not necessarily a really tuned up 1911 trigger, but just a nice trigger that they don't have to focus on that nice, slow, smooth, even trigger press. If they got something that's really light and really short, it's just one less thing they have to think about.
Basically, one of the guns I've always hated over the years, frankly, is the Smith & Wesson SDVE. You familiar with this gun?
Very.
Now, the new versions, the trigger is nicer, but that's nicer. You know, they are, and the problem is that they're value guns, right?
Sure.
And so people get these guns, they're reliable enough. I haven't seen any issues with reliability.
They work.
And they do everything right though. They get their good grip, they get their sights lined up, they get that trigger press, and then they're, is there something wrong with my gun? Nope, keep on pulling. And that just makes, as you said, makes everything harder than it needs to be.
Right.
Same thing with like double action revolvers, right? Double action only revolvers, is they run into some of those same issues. Now those trigger pulls are a little bit cleaner, but even that, you know, you have all this stuff you're trying to process, and then you also have to worry about that trigger pull that just seems to go on forever. So,
and like you were saying, when somebody's locked in and they're on target and they're doing everything right, and then all of a sudden they got to put their boot on the back of the gun to heave that 13-pound trigger or whatever it is. They just ran up against a brick wall, and everything that they were doing right just fell apart.
Yeah.
Because now they hit a hard stop against that awful trigger, and now that's the only thing they're paying attention to, and now their grip might be sacrificed. Their stance is coming apart. They've quit paying attention to their sights because, like you said, even people kind of do this little side look at their gun, like what's stuck in? Is there a rock behind my trigger? And now everything's falling apart because we're up against this just awful trigger. So yeah, and the SD, the Sigma Series Smiths are bullets come out the end.
Yeah,
I'll give them that.
Too long didn't read, guys. If you've got a cruddy trigger, fix it. And if you don't know how, this guy does. So. With that said, guys, I appreciate you watching. Thank you very much, Andy, for showing these to us. If you guys have any needs, whether that be getting a trigger job done on your gun, getting your gun ported, getting a nice Cerakote job done on your gun like you see this one right here, we can help you out here at the Custom Shop. Andy's your guy, so come on in. And again, thanks, Andy. Thanks for watching, guys.
Life's too short for boring guns.
See, it was fine earlier when I wasn't overthinking it. It was just a conversation. Now it's a whole thing. Now it's a whole thing.
Blooper reels, though, these are great.
Yeah.
People love seeing that stuff.
Yeah.